Welcome. So I guess we can start. It is 11:05. Um, Welcome to Rena, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, uh, and I don't want to butcher it. I want to be respectful of the name. So welcome. So my name is Ralph Joseph. I'm the third. You are at Digital Crafts Workshop of the games we love. There will be other people who will be trickling in, and as they trickle in, I do want to kind of like set just a little bit parameters about things. Um, as we get into the workshop piece, as we follow along, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to put them in a chat. I will be moderating the chat. David, David will be, leading us in this workshop. But if you have any specific questions, I'll moderate the chat and I can ask David, or David can, look at that. But I do want to share a little bit about digital crafts before we kind of get into creating the games that we love and we all desire, or games that you be able to create later on. So real quick, digital crafts. So what is digital crafts? When I heard digital crafts, you're like, oh, maybe it's like a crafts area that's more modern, but it's a technology boot camp, a training provider, and we're one of the tops in the country, and we offer intensive live instruction, educational experiences for students. And so it's the boot camp structure in itself. It's not like something you can oh, I'll do this, I'll get expedited education in that, and I'll be a master in program, master in web development. That's not the case. Uh, Boot camps are intensive. They can be rigorous. It's a lot of information. It's You're getting years and years worth of information within a set period of time. And so, but the thing about digital crafts, when you come into digital crafts, uh, we have a team of support that will be around you, as well as instructors who are experts in what they do, and you'll be very competent coming out to get those entry level jobs. Outside of once you come out of um, the boot camp or the program. Quick little surface questions to be answered, because these are some of the questions we get a lot of. We have two different web development programs. We have a full time, and then we have a part time. The full time, because everybody want to know the cost, So the full time cost of the web development is a tuition of $14,950. And the part time web development cost is $9,950 coming into the boot camp. We do have ways that you can go about paying or for financial assistance, as well as scholarships. Uh, uh, when I say financial assistance, I mean you can finance through we have a third party lender that students typically use, which is called Climb Credit. And more information about Climb is listed on our website under the resource tab. And then you have the sub tab called Financing Intuition. And so you can just go there, and you'll be able to play with the user calculator and see how much your monthly estimate would payback would be for a Climb. If you don't want to go that route, you're able to go we have a 4 installment payment plan that you can use for both full time and part time. And the 4 installments, your first payment would be 2 weeks prior to the class, and each payment is 25% of what your tuition would be. So if you are doing full time, the cadence is you have the 2 week, you pay the first portion 2 weeks before class. Then every cadence is at the end of fourth week, at the end of the week 4, at the end of week 8, and then at the end of week 12 is when those next payments would be. For the part time class, the first payment is 2 weeks before, and then the cadence after that is at the end of your second payment is at the end of week 6, at the end of week 12, and then at the end of week 18. So that's what we have with payments. We do have some scholarships. We have a You Belong in Tech scholarship. Um, and that is an automatic scholarship given to Black, Latinx, and women. So if you identify as any of those groups, you will get that automatic You Belong in Tech scholarship. We also have the Builder scholarship, uh, and that one you have to apply for, It's a 250-word essay of how you would use programming or how you would use tech to better the community or those around you. And the last question I want to address is, do you have to have any prior knowledge coming into this boot camp to, like, you know, be a part of this? And that answer is no. We do have a free intro course that is available on our website. I'll put the link in the chat for you if you want to check that out. But it hits all the foundational things that you will learn in the class, and getting you on a good foundation, a good level to start once you get in class to hit that ground running. So that's just a little bit about digital crafts, and also our support service that we have. We do have a robust support service. We try to make it as robust as we can. I'll hit the highlights and then I'll hand it to David, because David is why we're all here. And so with our career support, we do have we hold mock interviews. You're able to schedule one-on-one sessions with your TA if you have a TA in the class, or your cohort manager. We provide live career talks with that fall under topics of resumes, building out your portfolio that you would do in class, mock interview, like interviewing, job interviews, job searching, and building out a strong LinkedIn or online presence for yourself. And then we also have mentorship programs, program that you would be able to do if you want to. And then lastly, we do have virtual career fairs that students will be able to take advantage of. So that's just a little bit about our support services. I will put some links throughout this time in the chat in regards to, like, setting up an info call if you want to, or starting an free intro course if you want to as well. But without further ado, I do want to introduce David. David has decades, not, I was, because I don't put age to you, worth of educational experience, and he is our education director here at Digital Crafts. And so, David, I will stop sharing my screen, and the floor will be in your hands. Sounds good?
Sounds great. So first of all, welcome to everybody. It's great to see you all. Today, I'm hoping to cover a lot of one major concept overall. And so the idea behind it, when I was kind of coming up with the lesson, just to give you a little insight, is that when I take a look at something like what we're seeing here, as you're getting ready to go out and, start, playing around with the idea of coding, getting more excited about it. One of the hardest things that I found early on was finding projects that I thought that were appropriate for me to be able to try and, create. And one thing that I found early on that really helped me kind of build that sort of idea and that foundational concept was taking a look around at the world of game shows. Because a lot of times when we watch a game show, they already have a set of rules defined for us. They have a set of ideas. I can watch examples and exemplars of exactly what it looks like, things like that. And so when I'm trying to build a program, and I want to really kind of get the meat and potatoes of, can I code well, this is generally a good starting point because of how well defined the expectations are from top to bottom. You can play along through with it. You can see exactly what's kind of going on as you go through that program, and you can kind of build it a piece at a time. And that's what's really kind of at the core of all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we're going to take a look at a coding window. Now, today I'm going to be definitely hitting a little bit harder the idea of, me kind of showing the things that we're seeing. But what we're going to take a look at in particular, let me move this out of the way, boom, is I'm in what we call an IDE. Now, the IDE that I'm using, it's also an editor in itself, is VS Code. And basically what I'm going to be using in it is just really a lot of its file structure and Emmet, just to kind of help get things along. So the idea that I've done is I've made a folder for today called Live Lesson, and I'm going to go into that. And I'm going to create another folder. And this one I'm just going to call scripts, because this is where my JavaScript file will live. And then I'm going to create one more in the original thing, this time a file, and I'm going to call it something like index.html. The problem with JavaScript, as opposed to some of the other programming languages that you might run into, is that JavaScript isn't a big fan of giving us information. When we're in Python and other programming languages, a lot of times it will kick back and be like, oh, wait, you want me to print something for you? I got you. And then it will just print it to the screen and everything is all fine and good. And you're like, oh, thank you. You're some kind of programming language. JavaScript doesn't like doing that. In fact, there's not really a way to print something very easily. There are two ways that we can kind of do it. One is through a console log, but to do that, we need the internet. And so in order to get this hooked up to the internet, that's what this HTML file will be for. I'm going to put the script into this HTML file and allow that to work. Now, if you have VS Code, there is a trick to make this really easy for us. I just go ahead and put an exclamation point, and you'll see that it says emit abbreviation at the end. That came along with VS Code. And when I click that, it will automatically fill out all of this nice information for me to make it a bit easier for me to be able to handle that. But for the most part, really what I'm looking for is that it starts off with this line here, which just means that this file is an HTML file, that the HTML language is English. And then a lot of these are just kind of straightforward in here. The heading is a lot of metadata, things that are just kind of, information that's kind of going on under the hood. The one area I will change is title. We're going to call this the title of the game show for today, which we're going to do Deal or No Deal. I don't know if it's a game that you're as familiar with or that you've played or that you've seen, but this one, the most recent edition was done by Howie Mandel. And basically there's going to be a bunch of people on stage holding briefcases, and inside each briefcase is a value, and that value is some money. And the idea behind it is at the very beginning, you're going to hold on to a briefcase that's yours, and that amount in the end will be yours. But along the way, every so often, a banker will come in and tell everyone, hey, by the way, if you were just to leave the game right now, we'll go ahead and offer you this much instead. Now, you could be holding $1 million in your hand and he just offered you like 100,000, which would be a tragedy. And so there's this real version of risk versus reward as we kind of go through this. And that's what we're going to be mimicking today. So all I'm really trying to do before I get everything there so we can talk about the game more is get it set up so I can actually handle this sort of scripts thing. And so in this folder, I'm going to add one last thing. I'm going to add one more file, and this file I'm going to call something like scripts.js. The .js tells me that it's a JavaScript file. And so these three things are going to kind of work together to give us everything that we need. Now, to actually access that scripts page, the easiest way to do it would be something like this, where we say, okay, I'm going to have a script, and I want you to find it in the following location. And notice that it recognizes that there's a scripts area. And in this case, we want scripts.javascript. From there, that's good enough to tell the code that any script we're going to be running JavaScript-wise is located at this area. And so now it's made a connection here. The last thing that I'm going to do on this index.html page, interestingly enough, is I'm just going to go ahead and put a button. And the button that I want to put here is going to have an on-click command. And so what that's going to do is it's going to say, okay, if you click this, I want you to do the following. And I'm just going to say, I want you to begin the game. And that should be sufficient for that. And then I'm going to end off with the ending tag. And I'm going to say something like start. Okay. So this is the last connection we need before we can actually get our JavaScript up and running and really kind of handle that. So let me explain what this is actually doing. This will create a button on our page that's going to reach out and look through our different scripts for a method or a function called begin game. And it's going to hunt for that. And so we don't have any script in here that says that. And so now it's going to go ahead and look into the JS scripts. And so when I come over here, I'm real quickly going to want to go ahead and create a function called, well, it's not going to let me do that. Let me go ahead and make sure that I've copied this because I'm bad at writing. And there we go. Everything in here will go ahead and run when we go ahead and run hit the button. And so just to make sure that it's making the connection, I want to go ahead and send an alert to my screen that says something like, we did it. And a little bit more excited. Woo! Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save my two documents. And I'm going to right-click into this index.html. I'm going to reveal it in a Finder. And it shows it here as index.html. And I want to open this with Google Chrome. And when I do, I see that I've got this deal or no deal file. And I've got a button that says start. And when I click that start button, it says exactly what I said that it said it was going to do. And I get we did it, woo, and that's exciting. That means that I've properly connected that button to this screen. And so we've done a lot of what we're kind of intending. What you're going to notice is that I go back and forth between what it is I'm seeing on this page versus what it is that I see in my code from here on out. Now, before I go much further, we now need to talk about the actual game, because everything from here on out, we're done with this. This is kind of doing what it needs to do. We now are going to handle this alone. And that's the big deal. That's what we've been trying to get to, is how do we build this game now? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull over this Wikipedia page to kind of talk about the game just very briefly. Make sure that we kind of have that. We've got some gameplay. It varies from country to country. For ours, the main game is revolving around an opening of a set of number of briefcases, which are each going to have a different prize, cash or otherwise. In this case, we're going to use cash, and we're going to use the US version of money, I think. So that's the goal. Basically, all the values of the case are known at the start of the game, but you don't know where they're located. So case one could have 1 cent. Case one could have $1 million. We don't know what's in each one of the cases because they're hidden. But on the inside of them, when we open it up, it's going to have a value. Now, what we're going to do is right off the bat, we're going to say the contestant, whoever's playing, is going to pick themselves a case. Usually we ask them for their favorite number or something like that. They pick it, they're now given that case, and it's put off to the side. And that value that's inside, we don't know what's in there. So they could have pulled a case that had 500,000. They could have pulled a case that had like $1. They don't know, and we don't know either. And we're not going to know until the game's conclusion, okay? Now, from then, they're going to choose the cases that they're going to remove. And the idea behind this is that they're going to be given like, okay, go ahead and take 6 cases, and they're going to take them one at a time, and they're going to choose them. And when they choose them, it opens up to show what the money was inside. And since we now know that that money is no longer available, that's off the table. We know that that can't be in our box, okay? And so if I open up one that says 1 cent, that's really good, because that means the million's out there and I just got rid of something. I definitely don't have 1 cent in my case. But if my first case I open up is $1 million, that's an actual tragedy, because I'd probably start crying, because that means that that part's over. And so after a certain number, a banker is going to come in and do some sort of mathematics, and it's going to offer to end the game. And all I have to do is say whether or not I want to continue the game and keep going. And then it will offer me, more chances to choose more cases. Or I can quit, walk away, and say, I want what's in my case. In which case, I open it up and I say, oh, there's the final amount. And that's the idea behind it. That's the deal or no deal. He's going to offer, the banker is going to offer a deal. And in the end, we're going to walk away saying whether or not we want to do that. If we make it to the very end, they're going to give us a choice between our case or another case, and we're going to see how that goes. So that's what we're really trying to build here. Now, I'm going to take these rules and I'm going to bring them over here into our code, because we should. So the first thing that we're going to do, those 2 lines, by the way, mean a comment. That's something that's not run in my console. It's just there. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, ask the user to pick their favorite number. And we need to save this This is their case. Okay. From there, we need to remove this case from the list of possibilities, but not from the values. We're not going to show them the value that's on the inside of that case. We need to hold on to the cases and then remove them and say, you can't pick 2 anymore, but we're not going to remove 2's value. From there, we're going to ask them to choose 6 cases, one at a time, and tell them how much was in the case between it each round. After that, we will have the banker let them know how much they are being offered and let them either make a deal or no deal. If it is a deal, let them see the case and end game. Otherwise, if it isn't, continue on. Okay? That's the idea behind this. So I know that seems simple. You're like, oh, there's 6 lines there, but there's a lot of code hiding in each one. And so the first thing that we're going to kind of do is we have to start problem solving this and thinking about what it takes to actually go through trying to solve these problems. And the first one that comes up is asking the user to pick their favorite number. We want to save this, and this is their case. So we're going to go ahead and get that information from them. And that's, something that we're going to need to, do. One thing that I'm thinking though, we're going to ask them to pick this, and we're going to keep asking them to do this. So this might be something that we keep doing over and over and over again. And so anytime I hear something that I think, man, I'm going to do this a lot, my first question to myself is, should I try to make this a smaller method that we jump out of and try to use off to the side? And the answer in this case is going to be yes. But first, I just want to make sure we can get this working. That would be the real goal. So let's go ahead and try to do that first. I'm going to go ahead and start a new line after this one. And when I do, I'm going to say something like, let our case, because this is ours, it belongs to us, and we're going to go ahead and basically ask them for a case. And to ask them for a case, the way that we do that is we're going to use a command called prompt. Now, what prompt does is it's going to prompt a message to the screen, and it's going to just come up as a dialog box with an empty space for them to type something in, and it's going to ask them basically a question. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, select a number between 1 and 26, because there's 26 cases. And that's all we want to do right now. And what we're going to do to see this result is console.log it to make sure that what we've done is actually being held. Okay. If we do that, we've asked them to pick their favorite number from that, number set, and we'll save this because that's going to be their case. The way that we saved it is by saying let our case. So let is indicating that this is a variable, and we've created a new variable called our case. In this case, that variable is going to hold on to the answer that we're getting here. Now, you might be like, well, can we get this a little bit more interesting? Could we visualize this? And the answer is yes, down the road, we would create HTML and CSS to make this look really cool. But we want to get the functionality first, and that's why we're hiding in JavaScript so much. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that. And I'm going to bring back our web page from earlier. Shoop. And I'm going to hit start. And it said we did it. Woo. And that's a problem. Let me go back over here, figure out what went wrong, and realize that I didn't hit refresh. I'm going to hit refresh so that way it knows that there's something new. And now when I do it, it says pick a number between 1 and 26. Now, before I do that, I want to go ahead to go to more tools and developer tools, because when I do, I'm actually going to want to see something in here, mainly what it actually returns with. So I'm going to pick the number 3. I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to let me know we did it again. And I'm going to go to console. And when I do, I see that the number that I typed is there now. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to move this away, and I'm going to go into this real quick. So line 1, which was here, was where it prompted. Then that console.log kicked it over to the side. And I don't need this alert anymore because we know that we did it. And so we're kind of good there. We don't need that anymore. All right. Now, from here, we've now saved this case. We've got this off to the side, but we're going to need to start having a way of removing it. And in order to remove it, we need 2 things. We need to know what cases we have, and we need to be able to remove them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with something a little bit more. And I'm going to go back to the top. I'm going to have a new let. And I'm going to call let it equal to cases. And now the cases I'm going to use as a list. A list is a storage device that allows me to hold a bunch of key components. In this case, it's going to hold numbers. And so these cases are going to hold on to all of the cases that we are currently still having. And so I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way through, 26. And if I really wanted to do that, we could just do it this way, because at some stage I was like, man, I'm going to really want this. And I have it. So boom, there's the numbers 1 through 26 through the mystery and magic of, copy and paste. There's all the cases that we have. And now we want to go ahead and remove it. We're going to use this method a lot. And so because every single time we take a case away, we're going to remove it from the possibility of cases. So I'm now going to say, after this moment, I want to call a function called remove case. And I'm just going to type that real quick. And I'm now going to go to the top, and I'm going to add a new function. And this function I'm going to call, surprise, remove case. Okay. And this is where some problem solving begins. What things do I need to know in order to remove the case? Think about it. You got it in your head? I'll give you a hint. There's 2 things that we do need to know.
The number.
We need to know the number that we have, as well as what cases are still around. Because, if I keep using the same list, they're going to remove once, and then I'm back to the same list. So we're going to do this in two versions. I'm going to need, first of all my cases, and then the case to be removed. Okay. And so what that does is that says, I'm waiting for these 2 things to come along. It doesn't know what these things are, and that's okay. I'm just naming them so that they're very clear what they're going to do, and then I'm going to handle that from there. Okay, so the thing is, all my cases is going to be the list of cases, 1 through 26. And so when I think about kind of how to do that, the first thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to be able to find the index that we're looking for. And so if I were to really think about that, we could go ahead and remove the case from the list of current cases, and that would work. We could definitely do that. How would I start going about doing that? Would be a good question at this stage.
I mean, looking inside you can use the log as a way to like, oh, did they pick this case? And then make sure from the log it's removed.
Okay, so let's make sure we can at least get the cases up there, and then also the value, because we need that log information. And that log information we did save. That's called our case right here. And so we definitely have that. So let's go ahead. That case is what we're going to want to remove. And so we're going to say, okay, the second thing that we're passing through is our case. And the first thing that we're going to pass through is the list of current cases that we have. So all of my cases is this variable that's holding on to all of this information here. And in particular, our case is right here, which is going to be the case that we want to remove. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a console log of both those things. All my cases and case to be removed. That way we can see what it is that we're talking about. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now I'm going to remove this one because we're already seeing our case. Okay. So I'm going to save here, Control S, come back over here, refresh, and drop this in. And now when I go ahead and do start, it's going to ask me to pick a number. I'm going to pick 5. And I see that it gives me the 26 values that I had before, as well as the number 5. So we've now passed everything so that it's there. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to remove basically the number that we are trying to find. And so what we can do is we can say, first of all, we want to be able to get this value. And so like, let's say we picked 5, we want to remove 5 from this information. And to do that takes 2 parts. We need to know where 5 was. And then from there, we need to say, okay, but seriously, get rid of 5. Okay, to be able to do that, we actually have a slight problem, and we just need to make sure that this is in the correct data type. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say, case to be removed is going to actually equal something new. And I'm going to call it a parse int. And what this does is it takes whatever it was before, and it's going to try to make sure that it's an actual number. Because the thing is, in order to be able to tell me where something is in here, these are all numbers. That's why they're red. They're not a word, but when we got it back, it might be a word. And so we just need to be really careful to make sure, this case, we're going to parse it to make sure that it's an actual number, and that's going to be this new value. And then from there, we're going to actually say something else. We're going to say something like let, and we're going to call it the index. And what the index is going to do is it's going to tell me where exactly this thing was found. And so I'm going to take a look at all my cases. And in that, I'm going to use a method from arrays, which this is an array type called index of. And then I'm going to take a look at case to be removed. Now, what this will do is it's going to say, okay, where did I find this case? Okay, I found it. It's going to be here. So if I tell it to find number 11, it's going to look for number 11 and it's going to find it. Okay, from here, the only other thing we have to do is we're going to have to splice out this area. And that's actually pretty easy. So we've got all my cases. And we're going to say splice. And when we do, we want to splice the index. And we only want to take away one object, which is going to be that object we found there. If I had typed in the number 2, it would take that and the next thing. If I had typed in the number 3, it would take out 3 things in a row. Okay. And from there, I want to return. Well, before we return, let's just make sure we did this correctly. We're going to console log all my cases just to make sure that this worked. So if I pick the number 9, when this is done now, it will remove the number 9. That's the goal. So I've saved this. I'm going to come up here, refresh, and then I'm going to pull this in. Swoop. Okay. So I'm going to hit start. I'm going to pick the number 5. I see here that the number 5 was there, and that's the original one. Then I said I wanted the number 5, and notice that it removed the number 5. So I've gone through this problem-solving process. And so that's now done what I need it to do. And now that's ready for the next part. Okay. So what I've done is I've taken a look at this first case and I said, okay, I want to ask the user to pick their favorite number, save this, and then we remove their case. We've removed it from the list of possibilities, but not from the values, which is great because I haven't even talked about the values yet. So like we're doing pretty good on that. All right. So what we need to do now is we're going to do one other thing. You see, we're going to actually say cases, which was this from before, is now going to be equal to whatever we got back from this function up here. So this function needs to return something. It needs to tell it, hey, I did what I was asked to do. Here's what you needed. And so when I think about functions and returning something, I think about it in terms of like a microwave. If I tell you to go microwave something, you're like, I can do that. And so you walk over to the microwave, and regardless of what microwave it is, you kind of push the button, you open it up, you handle it, you get that out. And then you handle food because like you've microwaved it. You know that there's a process called microwave in your head. You know you're going to go to the microwave, you're going to push some buttons, you're going to get them food out. And then when you're done, you're going to hand me the food. So you have to tell me, return the food. In this case, what do we need to return here? What does it need to know that we've changed? Which one of these parameters or variables?
The cases.
The cases, in this case, all my cases. So all my cases is going to be returned, and that's now going to update. So that way it's now missing what we said from before. At this stage, I know that this is working. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these here. Okay. All right. So we've done that. That's a check. That's a check. And there's one other thing that I'm going to do. We need a list of values. So I'm going to do one more thing. And I'm going to call this list let, and we're just going to call these values. And what this is going to be is another one. This is all of the different prices that can be in the cases. And so we have all of them. And so these are all the different various dollar amounts, 1 cent, $1, $5, $10, 25, 50, all the way through 1 million. Okay. So those are the game show values that they offer. We just need to hold on to them for right now. Okay. Now, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and handle this next thing. Ask them to choose 6 cases, one at a time, and tell them how much was in each round. Okay. So at this stage, I think that this is the main part of the game, right? This is the part where everything is kind of set up and ready to go. So I'm going to actually call this the main game. Boom. What information do I need from what I have here for the main game, by the way? What things do I need to know?
The case that they picked, and also the value that was inside the case.
Yeah. So I'm also gonna add all the cases that are still left because we're gonna need that, as well as the values. And also you said that we probably need our case. So I'll go ahead and do those 3 things. I'm going to need these 3 bits of information anytime I play this main game. So now I come up here and I'm going to start the main game. And we know that there were 3 things that were needed. Our case was needed, a list of all cases, and all values. Okay. All right. Now, the idea is if I can get this to work for the first 6 times, I can get this to work for the future for the rest of the game as well. The way the game is played is that each time we have go through this kind of round, we're going to do it 6 times, then 5 times, then 4, then 3, then 2, because each time we want to kind of increase the intensity. So they don't have to go as far as they did the first time, which is kind of that risk versus reward factor again. And so we want to go ahead and handle this. And all of these things are now going to go ahead in here because this is where we're going to handle them. Okay. So we need to ask them to choose 6 cases, one at a time, and we're going to tell them how much it was between each round. So I'm going to say, we're going to hold on to something. We need to know what they've chosen so far. So I'm going to call these chosen cases. And we're going to hold that. And anytime I need to hold a lot of things at once, you're going to notice that I keep using that array. An array is a good data structure to be able to hold a lot of different things at once. And I'm going to actually create a for loop now. And I'm going to say for let I equal 0. And we're just going to do this once, so we don't need to kind of have that abstraction yet. We will eventually. I is less than 6. And we want to increase this by 1 every time, so I++. And we're going to come around here and handle this. And so what this is saying is I'm going to start, and the first time around, I'm going to use the number 0. And then I'm going to use the number 1. And then next time around, I'm going to keep doing everything in here over and over again the same way, using this new number that's come up. Now, I might not use that number itself. I might just be using it as the number of times that we're doing it. And in this case, I would. Notice that I'm saying less than 6, though. Think about it. If I start at 0, it would be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, which still counts to 6. It just didn't quite look like it. So that still holds. There's the 6 cases that we're going to ask them to choose. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we need to ask them for a case. And remember how earlier I prompted them and said, like, select a number between 1 and 26? We now need to kind of give them a little bit more information. And so this is where I'm going to say, you know what, from here on out, I'm not writing this out every time. We're going to make a function called, like, I don't know, ask for a case. And that actually needs something this time, because each time we're going to need to let them know what cases are remaining. In this case, we're just going to call that parameter, I don't know, cases. And so to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, let answer, which is going to hold on to the result of the answer for them, equal. And we used a method earlier. What word did we use to ask them a question from our original?
I totally forgot it. Prompt. Rena said prompt. Perfect. Good job, Rena.
So we go back, thank you. And I'm going to type in prompt, and I'm going to come through here, and I'm going to give them some information. Choose a case from, and then I'm going to use a concatenation technique. Concatenation is a fancy way of saying plus. Basically, this is going to merge 2 statements together, so that way I can use that. And in this case, I just want to tell them the cases. And then what I should return every time is, you know, the answer that they just said. Okay, that should work. I come back down into here, and now I need to go ahead and say, hey, by the way, ask for a case. And what we're going to give them is a list of all the current cases. And we're going to need to hold on to this a little bit. So let's go ahead and call that like the current ask. This is what they were currently asked for. And that current ask is going to hold on to whatever their answer came back from this up here. So each time around, it's going to store and hold on to the answer that we get back when we go into this area. And so it's going to say, choose a case from however many cases are remaining, and we're going to handle that. Now, I need to go ahead and take the answer that they just gave me and put this into the list of chosen cases. So to do that, I'm going to say chosen cases. And when we do this, this is going to be a list. We're going to push this answer that they've gotten into the list. We're just going to shove it in there, and it's going to be a part of that list now. So push pushes something onto a list. And so what do we want to push in this case? Well, we want to push what they just kind of gave us. So that's going to be the current ask. And that will now hold on to that information. And then what we need to do is kind of interesting, because we now need to get the value and let them know, remember? So we're going to have them choose 6 cases, one at a time, which is what we're doing, and then tell them how much was in the case in between each round. So we now need to yell at them. And earlier I gave you a method to yell at people. It was called alert. Alert lets you yell at people. And we can tell them something like the case had, and we've got like plus, and we've got all values, because that's holding on to our, you know, our money. And in this case, do you notice how case 1 had 1 cent, case 2 had $1, case 3 had $5, and they're kind of lined up against each other? We're going to use that to our advantage. So if they tell me that they want case 11, we need to find something that happens at the same spot that case 11 would have happened. So if they're saying 11, we need to look at the 11th spot. But the problem with arrays is they start at the number 0. So it's the 0th spot, the 1st spot, the 2nd spot, 3rd. And so the way that we're going to do it is we're going to say we want all values. And just like before, when we find an individual answer, we're going to use that %int. So %int of the current ask. And that's going to hold on to that value. And we're going to say, okay, do that number, but -1. And then I can go ahead and say so that way it seems more exciting because, nothing's exciting almost as an exclamation point. And then we're going to need to go ahead and remove the case again. So remember earlier, we had a remove case. We're going to need to do that again. And this time, the first thing that we need is all of my cases. So all of my cases are currently all current cases. And then the one in particular that we wanted, according to this, the case that we wanted to be removed is that current ask. So current ask. That should do it. But just like before, it's going to return back what was left behind. And so we need to update all of our current cases to be whatever's left behind. Okay, so that is now equal to all of this. One thing that I would probably want to start seeing at this stage is how do we actually know that this is what we've been doing? So I'm going to go ahead and do a console log to make sure I'm not crazy. We want to make sure that as these things are being removed, they actually are being removed properly. And so now is a good stage for us to go into test. Usually we want to test a little bit more often, but this is a good time to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to refresh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Somewhere, somehow, there is another lad like this hiding around. So the reason why I know this is because it's actually telling me that on line 13, there's kind of a sad day. And it's saying that we're kind of surprised. There's something going on here we weren't quite expecting. And so when I take a look at line 13, that's this one here. And what this is saying is that it's a little bit surprised because I didn't write function. What a sad day. It was a tragedy. Okay. And so the one thing I am noticing is that, by the way, notice that this is grayed out. It's just letting us know that we haven't used our case yet, but that will be fine. I'm going to go ahead and save, come back up here, refresh one more time, and notice that I didn't get that error this time because, I became 50% more apt since last time we tried. So I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 26, and I'm going to pick 4. And so notice that it's now asking me to choose a case. And so I've got 1, 2, 3, but notice that 4 is missing. This is doing what I asked it to do. So I'm going to pick a number that's still there, and I'm going to pick the number 10. The case had 300. Oh, but this is so gross. Look how they're like, ew, gross. We're going to have to fix that next round, okay? But I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to see that 4 is missing, and I'm also missing 10, which was the other number that I picked. Let's pick 20. Still gross. But I noticed that 20 is now missing. Let's pick the hard one, 26. Oh, that would have been so sad. I would have just lost $1 million. Notice I haven't shuffled yet. That's something we're going to have to do later on, but at least this is working. 21. And how about 1? And how about 5? And so I see that I've got 6 sets of these, which is what I said that I was going to have. And that each time it removed one of the values, told me what was there. It told me in a gross way that I need to go back and fix right now, but it did everything that I said it was going to do. So we're good to move on. Let's go back up here and let's find where that area was. Do you see how this says the case had, and there's not a space here, but then it goes straight into this? We never told it that we wanted a space between these two things. So Life is good now. It won't look gross next time I run it. And so we're good. Now, we need to get ready for the banker. And the banker is going to be able to kind of handle whether or not there's a deal or there's a no deal. And we're going to have to go through that part of the problem now. And so in order to handle that, we need to do something else. You see, every single time I showed you one of those values, that's no longer part of his calculations. So the banker is going to come forward and say, hey, by the way, I noticed that you picked 1,000,000, 100,000, 200,000. Banker is not about to offer you something good, okay? It's just not going to happen. And so the reason why is because as we take it away, the values are going to start become missing. Now, there are two ways to kind of go about this, and I'm just trying to think ahead. If I start taking away the different values and just removing them from my list, I would make my life harder because my original case doesn't know necessarily where in that value set it was. I'm actually using the fact that they're the same as the numbers. So I don't want to pull them away from the list at all. But all I'm really doing with that list is using it for a calculation. I'm going to use it to take an average. And so when I think of the word average, the one number that doesn't really change things would be the average itself, which in this case, we would kind of want just like the number 0. What I can do is I can come through and use the number 0, and then we'll just have to take account of that when we do the actual average to make sure that if the number says 0, we don't count that in our collection. So, you know, there's a give or take here of how I have to think about it. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to kind of create a new thing. And so I need to update the values now. And the values are going to be updated with, you know, removing the values. And so to remove the values, we need two things. The first is we need to know what cases were chosen. And so that's why we kept pushing all of the values that we were using before. That's how we know we selected in this round 6, 5, 3, 2, 17, and 26. Okay, that's been holding on to that whole time. And so I'm going to go ahead and use that. So chosen cases is what I'm going to pass forward first. And then we also need to know all the values that are still left. Okay. And so from there, I'm now going to have to create that function called remove values. I'm going to come up here, function remove values. And this one's actually a little bit easier in some ways because all I'm really going to do is I'm going to say, you know, I want, well, let's make sure that I do the same order, the cases that we're going to use, as well as the values still left. And that's going to be a list. And so from there, I'm going to use those 2 bits of information. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go through this and I'm going to say, okay, for, and we're going to loop through each one of these cases that we just saw. We're going to let the case, which is a new variable of chosen cases. And what this does is it's a different type of for loop. It's going to go through each one of these cases in this list, and it's just going to give me the value that was there. That's why we use this word of. Of tells me that that's a different type of loop. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, you know what? I don't want the case to be equal to what it was. I keep using the same trick over and over again. What should the case actually be equal to based on what we do generally before we do anything else with it when we use list? Right now, the case itself might be a string. And so we can't find that index in a string. In order to get that better, that's why I keep parse inting it. It will turn it into a number. So I'm going to have a parse int. And in this case, it's going to be parse int of the case. And then from there, I'm going to say, okay, you know what? I want values of that value, that case, -1, because it's always 1 less than what we said. We're going to make that equal to 0. And then all we need to do is return the values. And that should be good. Now, I do want to do just a console log real quick to make sure that the values is actually correct. And so this will be done only after we've kind of done everything else. I'm going to come back up here, refresh one more time. And I'm going to hit start. I'm going to pick my case, which is number 4. 4 is gone. And I'm just going to pick numbers starting from the beginning. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And now it says that I had an error. Okay. I do notice that everything was working out so far, but chosen cases is not defined at 14. So I come back over here and I see chosen cases is not defined. I didn't use that value. I used the word cases instead. So that should have been what was here instead, because that was the actual parameter that was holding on to the chosen cases. Coming back through very quickly, refresh one more time, start. Going to do the number 4 again. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And notice that it had all of those, but notice that the value for 4 is still around because that was my case. I'm still holding on to that because the banker should still be doing calculations with that number. The only thing the banker shouldn't be doing calculations with is these zeros. And so that's what we're going to use at the end. We actually just need one more thing, and then the main part of this game is done, and you could play around with the rest of it to make it work for the rest of the game. But the last part is that banker feature. So let's go ahead and implement that real quick. It's going to need to know how to do this banker. And so the banker is going to need to know one thing in particular. The banker needs to know what values are still left. Actually, we're going to call this one all values still, because that's what came through. And so the banker needs to know all values. The banker will also need to know our case just in case, because it's going to make a decision. Now, what we're going to do up here is we're going to call a function called banker. And it needs all the values. And it also needs to know our case in particular. And then from there, we should be able to go through. And I'm going to use a very similar loop to what we did before. So I'm going to do for money, let money of all values. And what this is going to do is it's going to look through each one of those money values now. And we want to do this only if money is not equal to 0. Because those are the numbers that we're going to want to do. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 values, one called sum, we'll call it res, which is the result. And that's going to be currently equal to 0. And we're going to have another one called counter, which is also equal to 0. And if the money is not equal to 0, we want to do something in particular. We're going to say, okay, let's take a look at this value, and we're going to take whatever res was before and add it, and it's going to be equal to whatever res is now plus money. Okay, so it's going to go through, and each time it's going to say it's going to go up by money. And then last but not least, counter needs to also be equal to whatever counter was before, and then one higher. And then at the end, we can do a quick alert just to make sure it's working. And the alert, we'll say like let final value offer be equal to something like res divided by counter. And then we will say something like, maybe parse that as an int, if possible. We'll just see it first. It's going to come out kind of nasty. So alert, I will offer you plus the final offer. Okay, so if this has worked correctly, it will basically do all of this. And that's actually, once we see this work, that's where we're going to unfortunately stop because we've kind of already got over. And yeah, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. Refresh the page, start. I'm going to pick the number 4, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. And it's going to offer me a pretty high value. Now that high value makes sense. I got rid of all my low numbers, but kept all of my high numbers. And so if I were to take the average of all of these values, that's pretty good, even though the case that I chose only holds $10. Like, honestly, I need to start walking really quick. But that's the idea behind this. Now, if I were to do this a little bit further and kind of spell out the things that you would want to try beyond this, one, you would want to make sure that you could now do this for if there were 5 times. And you would want to make sure that we give them the choice that if they, instead of just an alert, give them the choice of saying either deal or no deal, where if they say deal, we end the game. And if they say no deal, we continue on. The other thing that we want to do is add some sort of random value here, because like this value is nice, but it's just an average, and averages don't necessarily always work the way we would want them to. And so we could give them maybe a little bit higher as they go along, just to really see if they take the value, or a little bit lower if we notice they're doing poorly, those sorts of things. So there are a lot of ideas that we can kind of do from this stage, but really we've got the core gameplay kind of actually fleshed out at this stage, and now it's just kind of going through the rest. But when I was talking at the very beginning of noticing that everything that I kind of developed here today never came from me, but the actual game. And that's what you're going to be asked to do if you ever run into a job where you're coding, or you want to get into this field a little bit deeper. Somebody else is going to tell you a lot of conditions, and you're going to try to match them. And that's a really vital tool for us to be able to use and apply in the real world. And so what I found is that the more and more that I do this, the better that I get in being able to handle somebody telling me, I want you to do X, Y, Z, and actually being able to bring it to life as is. And it takes a lot of that stress off of me, because I'm not trying to come up with every condition. Somebody did that part for me. And now this is a quick, 2-hour task for me to just see if I can do on a weekend. It's a fun way to keep my skills up. It's a fun way just to make sure that I know what I'm doing. But overall, it's a fun way to make sure that I've practiced.
Awesomeness. That was great, David. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And we used to like watch Dylan O'Dill all the time growing up, my mom, stuff like that. So it was awesomeness. So I do want to say once again, thanks, David. If you at all are interested in learning how to do make awesome games yourself, Digital Crafts, like I said, our programs teach you JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Node.js, Express, as well as SQL. And so you can easily, apply or schedule an info call. Great question. Do we get a recording or GitHub link for the program code?
I can go ahead and make sure to, I know that this will be posted later, I'm sure,
Mhm.
but I can also make sure to get this up to GitHub, and I'll pass it along so that way we can try to get back to y'all. So, yeah.
For sure, great question, and so there you have it. This will be up, and it'd be great to see what what you come up with, even from this code, and see how you use it. It'd be awesomeness. But yeah, you can visit digitalcrafts.com. And if you're interested in joining or starting a program or have any more questions, there's on our main page, you can schedule a free, of course, everything's free. You can schedule an info call with one of our enrollment coordinators, or you can go ahead and dive deep and just apply, and we'll be waiting for you. But once again, thanks to David. Thank you all for showing up, and have a great day.